Today's big idea. The modern world runs on a hard-won rule. States don't get to threaten or use force to grab what they want. Hathaway and Shapiro argue that this norm, built after 1928 and cemented in 1945, is now being openly eroded. In their telling, recent U.S. rhetoric about seizing Greenland or the Panama Canal, owning Gaza, or pressuring Ukraine to cede territory isn't just bluster, it's an assault on the legal order that kept conquest rare in the great power war at bay. So a bit of a disclaimer. This episode is basically a summary of an article called Might Unmakes Right: The Catastrophic Collapse of Norms Against the Use of Force, by, Oona Hathaway and Scott Shapiro. Basically, it's just trying to understand this point of view, more or less, and that's pretty much all we're going to say on that. But to continue, so basically the lesson for this is outlawing war changed everything, and what we're talking about is the 1928 Kellogg Pact, and later the UN Charter from 1945 that replaced the whole might makes right with a prohibition on the threat or use of force. So that shift rewired incentives. Conquest lost legal validity. It lost legal validity. Neutrality no longer meant sitting on your hands, and economic tools, as in like sanctions, trade access, financial exclusion, became the main enforcement mechanisms. The result was fewer interstate wars, far fewer successful conquests, in a safer, richer world. The lesson: when the anti-conquest rule holds, law and economics do the work that armies used to do. When it frays, violence, borders, and markets all get shakier. So firstly, before the ban. So war was a legal process, more or less. For centuries, war was a lawful way to enforce claims. Conquest was recognized, sanctions were suspect, and neutrals had to be, quote, impartial or risk giving just cause for war. The result was constant churn and stunted prosperity. World War I showed the horror of that system, with over 20 countries fighting in some capacity at one point, and an estimated 20 million dead. Secondly, how this ban took hold. So the Kellogg Pact, that was formerly titled the General Treaty for Renunciation of War as an Instrument of National Policy, quickly drew 58 signatories, stated that aggressive war was illegal, and birthed the Stimson Doctrine, which was no recognition for land seized by force, first applied after Japan tried to grab Manchuria in 1931. Even Germany and Japan ultimately faced consequences. For example, lost conquest in the Nuremberg prosecutions, showing the new rules had teeth. Thirdly, this was locked in 1945. So the UN Charter banned the threat or use of force, voided treaties signed under coercion, and enabled accountability for aggression. Enforcement wasn't just moral suasion. The 1990-91 response to Iraq's invasion of Kuwait showed violators could be met with collective force authorized by the Security Council. Again, and further on, the measurable payoff. So in the 65 years after World War II's final settlements, the territory conquered annually fell to less than 6% of the pre-1928 average. The number of countries tripled from 1945 to today, and in the post-1945 era, there have been fewer than 10 successful territorial conquests versus over 150 in the prior century. So great powers haven't fought each other openly since 1945. That's the anti-conquest rule at work. Fifth, economics replaced gunboats. So with conquest delegitimized, states learned to outcast violators by using sanctions and exclusion from trade or finance, while global commerce expanded because wealth was safer from seizure. Law shaped behavior not because everyone became virtuous, but because they expected condemnation and penalties, especially from the United States and allies. And finally, the current erosion. So even before today, the rules were dented. So the 2003 Iraq invasion, China's militarization in the South China Sea, Russia's 2022 assault on Ukraine are just examples. But the authors argued the new U.S. posture goes further by normalizing threats of conquest and bargaining away others' territory. And other leaders are adjusting accordingly. If the norms collapse, expect an arms race, renewed wars of conquest, and shrinking trade as interdependence turns from a shield into a vulnerability. So Hathaway and Shapiro's bottom line: the rule against conquest is not a nicety. It's the backbone of a more peaceful and prosperous world. When the United States defends it, law and markets do the heavy lifting. When Washington shrugs at it, others prepare for a world where might unmakes right. The smart play is to shore up the prohibition on force, keep sanctions credible by using them judiciously, and remember that credibility in this system comes from enforcing the rules we helped write. If this hooked you, I recommend going and reading the article yourself. The full argument is crisp, urgent, and deeply sourced. And to get a little bit more on the authors themselves, again, this episode was a summary of their article in this past Foreign Affairs July-August 2025 edition, or I guess issue. But Oona Hathaway is a professor of law at Yale Law School and a non-resident scholar at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and president-elect of the American Society of International Law. And Scott Shapiro is a professor of law at Yale Law School and professor of philosophy at Yale University. And they both wrote a book called The Internationalists. So there's that too, if you guys want to check them out. As always, you can reach me in the comments. Let me know what you guys think about this new format. And I will see you guys on the next one.